Can I hide here? She was 72 years old, soaking wet, shaking so hard she could barely stand, and she was grabbing the sleeve of the most feared man in town. The parking lot went completely silent. Every biker froze. Colbert Harrison turned around slowly, looked down at the tiny trembling woman clinging to his leather jacket, then looked up at the two men in expensive coats walking fast toward them. And without saying a single word, he stepped forward. If this story moves you, subscribe to our channel. Drop a comment with the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The rain had been falling for almost 2 hours by the time Evelyn Carter made the decision that would change everything. Not the slow, polite kind of rain that makes people reach for an umbrella. The cold, sideways kind that stings when it hits your face. The kind that makes the roads slick and the world feel smaller than it already is. The kind of rain that makes you feel like God himself is trying to push you somewhere. Evelyn didn't care about the rain. She hadn't cared about much of anything comfortable in 6 days. 6 days of sleeping in her car, 6 days of eating crackers and water from gas stations, paying cash, never using her phone, never stopping anywhere long enough for anyone to notice her. 6 days of checking her rearview mirror so many times that the back of her neck had a permanent ache. 6 days of carrying something so dangerous inside her coat that she'd started to feel like the weight of it might crack her ribs. She was 72 years old. She had a bad hip from a fall 3 winters ago. She had a heart that skipped a beat now and then, in the way her doctor said wasn't serious but wasn't nothing either. She had reading glasses she'd lost somewhere outside of Billings and hadn't been able to replace. She had arthritis in both hands that got so bad some mornings she couldn't open a jar. Supposed to be running. She was supposed to be home. She was supposed to be in her kitchen making the chicken soup she made every Sunday, the one with the wide egg noodles and too much dill, the one her grandson Nathan said was the only soup in the world worth eating. She was supposed to be watching her evening programs, calling her neighbor Bernice to gossip about the new family on the block, falling asleep in her recliner with the television still on. She was not supposed to be standing in a parking lot in a town she'd never been to, in a state where she knew nobody, with 2 men behind her and nowhere left to go. She had stopped at the diner because she was dizzy. That was the honest truth, not because she had a plan, not because something in her gut told her this was the right move. She had stopped because her vision had started going gray at the edges somewhere around mile marker 47. And she knew from the one time she'd fainted in her garden back in 2019 that gray edges meant she needed to sit down and eat something real before she collapsed on the asphalt. She'd pulled in, she'd turned off the engine. She'd reached for her purse, and that's when she saw them in the mirror. The black sedan, the same one she'd spotted twice in the last 100 miles. Now, at the far end of the lot, was engine still running, 2 men sitting inside, not moving, not getting out, just watching, just waiting. Her hand had gone still on her purse strap. She'd done what Nathan told her to do if she was ever sure she was being followed. She hadn't gone inside. She hadn't used her card. She'd sat very still and thought very carefully and told herself to breathe, just think. And then the passenger door of the sedan had opened. And then the driver's door had opened. And Evelyn Carter had exactly 4 seconds to make the most important decision of her life. She got out of the car. She didn't run. Running drew attention. Nathan had told her that. Walk like you know where you're going. Even when you don't. Walk like the ground belongs to you. She'd practiced it in her head 100 times over the past 6 days. Head up. Eyes forward. She walked toward the diner entrance. And then she saw them. She had heard motorcycles when she first pulled into the lot. She'd registered them the way you register background noise, the rumble of engines, the pop and settle of machines cooling down, the low murmur of men talking. She hadn't looked directly at them. She'd been too focused on the sedan. But now, cutting across the parking lot with 2 men behind her and the diner entrance still 30 feet away, she looked. 8 of them, big men, not just tall, wide. The kind of men who took up space simply by existing in it. Leather jackets with patches she couldn't read. Boots that had seen serious miles. Had arms so covered in tattoos that even in the dim light of a rainy evening, she could see the ink from 20 feet away. Another one had a scar that ran from his left ear to the corner of his mouth. Another was laughing at something with his head thrown back, the kind of laugh that came from the belly and filled up all the space around it. Hell's Angels. She knew the name. Everybody in her generation knew the name. You grew up knowing that name. The way you grew up knowing to stay out of certain neighborhoods at certain hours, the way you knew certain doors you didn't knock on, certain situations you crossed the street to avoid. Every instinct. She had 72 years of instincts, a lifetime of careful living, trusting the rules and respecting the warnings and doing what sensible people did. Every single one of those instincts said, earned, not them, anyone but them. And then one of the men behind her said, low and calm and much closer than she expected, don't make this difficult. And something shifted inside her. Not bravery. She would tell you honestly it was not bravery. It was something older and more animal than bravery. It was the same thing that makes a rabbit run directly into a thicket of thorns because the open field behind it is worse. It was the calculus of desperation. The math that your body does when your brain is too frightened to think clearly. She calculated. Behind her men who knew her name. Men who had been following her for 6 days. Men who did not want her, who wanted what she was carrying. Men who had, she was almost certain now, done something to her grandson to keep him from being the one carrying it instead. Ahead of her, strangers. Big, loud, leather-jacketed strangers with a reputation that made most people cross the street. She chose the strangers. She moved fast. Faster than her hip liked, faster than was dignified. She cut left, away from the diner entrance, straight toward the cluster of motorcycles, and she grabbed the nearest leather sleeve she could reach with both hands, grabbed it the way you grab a railing. When you feel yourself falling, grabbed it with the full weight of desperation, and she looked up. The man attached to the sleeve was enormous, 6'3", maybe 6'4", broad through the chest and shoulders, in a way that made him look like something carved rather than grown. Brown gray hair pulled back, a beard that had some age in it, eyes that were, in that first second, completely unreadable. Colbert Harrison looked down at the small, soaking wet, trembling woman who had just latched onto his arm like a drowning person latches onto a life preserver. He did not pull away. He did not say anything. He just looked at her, and for one brief, breathless moment, the whole parking lot actually did go quiet. The conversations dropped. The laughter faded. Even the rain seemed to ease up, as if the world itself was holding its breath to see what happened next. I hide here, she whispered. The words were so small, so stripped of everything except what they were raw, honest need, the kind that bypasses every social filter a person has because there's simply no time for filters anymore. Cole looked at her face. He saw the circles under her eyes that come from days without real sleep. He saw the way her hands were shaking, not the mild tremble of cold or age, but the deeper, whole-body vibration of sustained fear. He saw the way she was holding herself, weight shifted slightly forward, knees slightly bent, like she was ready to bolt if she had to. He saw the wet clothes that had been wet for a while. He saw the set of her jaw, frightened, yes, absolutely frightened, but underneath the fear, something harder, something that had made decisions. He looked past her. 2 men in expensive coats 20 feet back and closing, not shouting, just walking with the particular kind of purpose that said they expected no obstacle. Faces were calm, in the way that faces are calm when they believe they have already won. Cole had known men who wore that kind of calm. He had not liked any of them. He shifted his weight, moved his arm, so that instead of the woman grabbing his sleeve, was behind her, not touching her, but present, a wall, and he stepped forward. Step, just one. But it was the right step at the right moment, and the 2 men stopped walking. Behind Cole, without a word being said, without a signal being given, without anything except the particular awareness that exists between men who have spent years reading situations quickly, the other 7 Hell's Angels shifted. Subtle movements, a foot planted differently, a body turned a certain way, face closed. Nobody raised a voice. Nobody made a threat. Nobody said anything at all. They didn't have to. The 2 men in expensive coats stopped at about 15 feet. The taller one spoke. His voice had the particular smoothness of someone who had spent a lot of time convincing people of things. We apologize for the interruption. This woman is a patient. She has dementia. She wandered from a care facility about 40 miles up the road, here to take her back safely. Cole looked at the man. He looked down at Evelyn. Ma'am, he said. His voice was low, normal. Not soft exactly, but steady in a way that was its own kind of gentleness. You know these men? Evelyn's grip tightened on his arm. Not from any care facility, she said. Her voice shook, but her eyes did not. I am not confused. I know exactly where I am, and I know exactly what they want. Cole nodded once. He looked back at the two men. She says she doesn't know you, he said simply. The taller man tried to smile again. Sir, with respect, that's exactly what we'd expect her to say. What care facility? Cole asked. The man blinked. "Hmm? What's the name of the care facility she came from? A beat. Just a beat, the smallest hesitation, the tiniest gap between the question and the answer. But Cole caught it the way a man catches something falling before it hits the floor. Automatic. Trained by years of reading rooms and situations and people who were trying to manage him. Care center, the man said. About 40 miles north. Cole asked. Harmon, the man said. Faster this time. Harmon, Cole repeated. That's right. Harmon, Montana, yes. Cole was quiet for a moment. Around him, nobody moved. Even Evelyn seemed to have stopped breathing. There's no town called Harmon in this part of Montana, Cole said. The taller man's face went through something complicated and then settled back into smooth. I may have the name slightly wrong. Who's her doctor? Cole asked. What's her son's name? More silence. A different kind of silence now. Which county would have the missing persons report filed? The taller man's jaw tightened. The smooth was cracking. The second man had shifted his weight, and his right hand had moved toward his coat. And Cole noticed this in the way Cole noticed everything automatically. Without visible reaction, the information filing itself away, while his expression remained completely unchanged. I don't think this is a conversation you want to continue, the taller man said, and the smoothness was gone now, replaced by something harder. I think you should step aside. Cole tilted his head very slightly. I think I shouldn't. You're making a mistake. Might be a serious one, probably. Something in the taller man's eyes went flat. The calculation happening behind them was visible to anyone who knew what to look for. And Cole knew exactly what to look for. He was watching the man decide whether this particular obstacle was worth the particular cost of removing it, weigh the variables, come up against the wall of 8 Hell's Angels, and a parking lot filling up slowly, with the kind of attention that nobody in his position wanted. Second man put his hand back by his side. The taller man smiled again. Smile this time, thin. We'll be in touch, he said. And they walked back to their sedan, unhurried, and they got in, and they drove out of the parking lot. Cole watched them go until the taillights disappeared. Then he turned to Evelyn. She was still holding his arm. She was shaking harder now. Actually, the particular shaking that comes when the immediate danger passes, and the body finally allows itself to feel what it's been holding together through adrenaline. Knees buckled slightly, and Cole caught her, one arm steady at her elbow, and walked her toward the nearest table outside the diner where a big canvas umbrella kept the rain off. Sit down, he said. Before you fall down, she sat. She put both hands flat on the table and pressed down like she was trying to feel something solid, breathing carefully. The way people breathe when they're fighting not to cry and are mostly winning. Cole pulled out the chair across from her and sat down in it. It creaked under his weight. Okay, he said. Take your time. She shook her head. I don't have time. You've got enough time to breathe, he said. She looked at him. Then she breathed. Long, careful breath in and out. I'm Evelyn Carter, she said. Billings. I'm 72 years old, and I'm not confused, and I don't have dementia, and I have not been reported missing from anywhere. My grandson's name is Nathan. He worked as a financial investigator, and about 8 days ago he called me and he said, her voice broke. She pressed her lips together, hard. He said if anything happened to him, I needed to do exactly what he told me. He drove to my house that same night. He gave me something, and he said, don't trust anyone who comes looking for it. Anyone. Cole was quiet. He called me twice after that, Evelyn said. 2 days later, nothing. No calls. His phone disconnected. I drove to his apartment. She stopped. Someone had been through everything. Not a robbery, nothing was taken, but everything had been searched. Everything. I found the one note he'd left me, just 5 words, no signature. And I got back in my car and I started driving, and I have been driving ever since. What did the note say? Cole asked. Evelyn looked at him for a long moment. She had eyes the color of faded denim, and whatever fear was still running through her. Those eyes were doing their own private calculation, the same one she'd done in the parking lot, the same math of desperation, except this time slower and more deliberate. Why would you help me? She asked. The question landed in the air between them without any aggression in it. Question, a fair one. A question that had been shaped by 6 days of trusting no one and watching everything she thought was safe dissolve around her. Cole put both elbows on the table. His hands, Evelyn noticed, large and had scars across the knuckles, not fresh. Old scars, years old, the kind that had long finished their story, and they were very still. Because you ran to me, he said. That's it? She asked. That's everything, he said. You were scared and you ran to me and you asked me for help. That's enough. Evelyn looked at him for another long moment. Slowly, she reached inside her coat. She pulled out a thin plastic bag sealed with 3 rubber bands. Inside the bag was a small rectangular object no bigger than a thumb, a USB drive. She set it on the table between them. Nathan gave me this, she said. He told me it contained financial records, evidence of embezzlement and fraud, connected to a company called Meridian Group. He said the amounts were, she paused. He said the amounts were the kind that bought people, investigators, officials. He said that if the wrong people got this before the right people, there would be consequences for a lot of lives. She looked down at the drive, then back up at Cole. He said, the most dangerous thing in the world is evidence that someone wants to disappear. Cole looked at the drive. He did not touch it. Those men, he said. You think they're connected to this Meridian Group? I don't think it, Evelyn said. I know it. Nathan told me they would come. He told me they would be polite at first, and then they would stop being polite. She pulled the bag back and held it in both hands in her lap. He told me one other thing. What? He told me not to trust anyone with a badge, she said. Not until he had a chance to make sure the right people knew what was on this drive. Because the wrong people, they look just like the right people. They have the same badges, the same suits, the same official words. She looked at Cole steadily. He told me the only people I could trust were the ones who had no reason to play a role. Cole was quiet for a moment. Found them. The other bikers had given them space, spread themselves out naturally. 2 at the diner entrance, 2 watching the road. The others settled back against their bikes, talking quietly, none of them looking directly at the table, but all of them in their peripheral vision, watching everything. Cole's best friend since 1997, a man called Dex, short for Dex, a name he had never once in 30 years, answered to drifted close enough to the table to be heard without being part of the conversation. Everything okay? Dex asked, not looking at either of them, hands in his jacket pockets, face turned slightly toward the road. Cole said. Dex nodded and moved off again. Evelyn said, watching him go. They don't, she stopped, seemed to be searching for the word. They don't seem like what I expected. What did you expect? Cole asked, for a moment, honest about it. Trouble, she said. Expected trouble. Cole almost smiled. Not quite the expression, stopped short of a full smile and became something quieter, more tired. That too sometimes, he said. But not tonight. Evelyn nodded slowly. What was in the note? Cole asked again. The 5 words Nathan left. She looked at the table. Her fingers had stopped shaking, he noticed. Rather, they were still shaking, but she was holding them still now by will, by the same quality that had gotten her through 6 days of running, and had put her in a parking lot, making the impossible decision she'd made. No one in suits, she said quietly. That was it. 5 words. She looked up. You're not in a suit. Cole looked down at his leather jacket, the one with 15 years of road on it, the one with the Hells Angels patch that had made people cross streets for 30 years. No, he said, I'm not. Evelyn Carter looked at this enormous, scarred, leather-jacketed man who had stepped in front of her, without asking a single question first, who had stood still when men with expensive coats and smooth voices had told him to step aside, who had caught her when her knees went, who had told her to breathe before she fell, and had been right, who had asked about Harmon, Montana without a moment's hesitation, and had known the answer. And she made her decision. I need to get this to someone I can trust, she said. Nathan had a name, a federal investigator, a woman named Patricia Dolan, field office in Helena. I don't know who's watching that office. I don't know who's intercepted what. I don't know how to get there without those men following me. She leaned forward slightly. I have been alone for 6 days. I am very tired and my hip hurts. And I haven't eaten a real meal since Wednesday. Her voice was matter of fact. The way people get matter of fact when they've gone past the point where emotion is a luxury they can afford. I need help. Cole looked at her for a long moment. He thought about what she'd said, trust no one in suits. He thought about the man in the parking lot with the flat eyes and the smooth answers that broke apart the moment you pushed on them. He thought about the second man in the hand that had moved toward the coat and then pulled back, the particular calculation of someone who was deciding whether a parking lot in a small Montana town was the right place to cross a line. He thought about the drive sitting in the little plastic bag in an old woman's hands and what Nathan Carter had put on it and why it made men in expensive coats follow a 72-year-old woman for 6 days across the state. He thought about a promise he'd made himself a long time ago, in a year he didn't like to name, after something happened that he didn't like to describe, on a night that had changed what he understood about what kind of man he wanted to be. When someone runs to you, you stand first. You figure out the rest after. Are you hungry? Cole asked. Evelyn blinked. What? I said, are you hungry? Because you look like you haven't eaten, and this diner makes a decent pot roast. He stood up and gestured with one large hand toward the diner entrance. You can tell me the rest inside, somewhere warm and dry. He was. Evelyn stared up at him. The exhaustion in her face was enormous, and something was happening behind her eyes that was neither quite relief nor quite grief, but the particular feeling of a person been carrying something unbearable alone and has just time in too long been offered a hand. I haven't said yes, she said carefully. Yes to what? To letting you help me. I haven't decided yet. Cole nodded. Fair, he said. Eat first, decide after. The pot roast will still be on the table either way. She looked at him for one more long moment. Then she stood up slowly, with the particular careful movement of a woman who had a bad hip and knew exactly how to protect it, and she said quietly. Behind them, Dex caught Cole's eye across the parking lot. The question in his face was brief and small, just a raised eyebrow. Cole gave the smallest of nods. Dex pulled out his phone. And in a diner parking lot in a quiet Montana town, on a cold, rainy evening that was already stranger than anything the town had seen in years, 8 Hell's Angels rearranged themselves without discussion or instruction into something that anyone watching from the right angle might have recognized as a perimeter. Threatening, not aggressive, just present, just watching every direction at once, just making sure that whatever came next, it wasn't going to come without warning. Evelyn Carter walked into the diner with Colbert Harrison. The first time in 6 days, she sat down at a table inside, somewhere warm with the door at her back and people between her and the parking lot. When the waitress came over and asked what she'd have, she ordered the pot roast and the coffee and a glass of water, and she said, please and thank you in the automatic way of a woman raised to mind her manners regardless of circumstances. And then she put both hands flat on the table and looked at Cole, and she started to talk. Because the 5 words Nathan had left her were not the only thing he'd told her to remember. He'd told her one more thing, the one thing she'd been turning over in her mind for 6 days, the one thing she'd almost dismissed as too simple, too naive, too much like something a person says when they don't truly understand how dangerous the world can be. He'd said, when you have nowhere left to run, find someone who has nothing to hide. She thought she understood what he meant. Sitting across from Cole Harrison in that diner, with his elbows on the table, and his scarred hands folded together, and his eyes steady on her face, waiting for her to speak and making no move to rush her, she started to think maybe she'd only just begun to understand it. Outside, the rain kept falling. The black sedan did not come back. Not yet. The pot roast came out in about 8 minutes, and Evelyn ate the first 3 bites without saying a word. Cole let her. He sat across from her with his coffee, and he did not tap the table or check his phone or do any of the things impatient people do when they're waiting for something. His coffee, and let her eat, and when she looked up at him between the 3rd and 4th bite, with a slightly embarrassed expression, like she'd forgotten herself, he just nodded once as if to say, keep going. She kept going. She ate half the plate before she set her fork down and wrapped both hands around her coffee mug and looked at him directly. Nathan is 29 years old, she said. He's been working in financial investigation for 4 years. Private firm, not government, but they contract with federal agencies on a case-by-case basis. He's very good at it, There was a particular quality in her voice when she said this, fierce pride of a grandmother who has watched a child grow into something remarkable and still feels the same kick of astonishment she felt the first time she held him. He has always been very good at finding things that people wanted to stay hidden. Kind of things, Cole asked. Money, she said. Specifically, money that shouldn't exist in the places it shows up. Shell companies, layered accounts, transfers that look legitimate until you trace them back far enough and realize the legitimate part is just a costume. She paused. He tried to explain it to me once. He said it's like laundry. The money goes in dirty, comes out clean, and if you're not paying close attention to the machine, you'd never know. And he was paying close attention to the machine, Evelyn said. Too close, as it turned out. She told Cole what she knew, which was not everything. Nathan had been careful about what he told her, protective in the way he'd always been protective, giving her enough to understand the danger without enough details to make her a useful target on her own. She had pieced together more than he'd intended her to, because Evelyn Carter had been reading people and situations for 72 years, and she was considerably sharper than the world generally gave her credit for. About 4 months ago, Nathan had been brought onto a case involving a company called the Meridian Group. On the surface, Meridian was a regional infrastructure development firm, roads, utilities, works contracts across 3 states. Solid, established, the kind of company that had its name on buildings and its leadership photographed at charity dinners. The kind of company that looked, from any casual angle, like exactly what it said it was. Nathan had been hired to perform what his firm called a compliance review, essentially, making sure Meridian's financial structure was clean before a larger federal contracting opportunity came through. Standard procedure, the kind of thing that happened dozens of times a year and almost always produced a clean bill of health and a modest invoice. Except Nathan had been 3 weeks into the review when he called Evelyn for the first time with something different in his voice. Not panic, not even alarm, exactly, just a particular quality of stillness, the stillness of someone who has found a room they weren't supposed to find and is standing very carefully in the doorway trying to decide what to do next. And he said, I found something, Evelyn told Cole. And the way he said it, I've known that boy his whole life. I know all his voices. The excited voice when he's figured out a puzzle, the tired voice when the work is grinding him down, full voice when he's talking about something that matters. She looked down at her coffee. That night he had a voice I'd never heard from him before. I didn't have a name for it then. I do now. What is it? Cole asked. Fear, she said simply. A grown man who has never once in his life showed me fear was afraid. He had told her, that first call, only that he had found financial irregularities that went significantly beyond what should have been there. Not the small-scale kind, not the common graft and padding that showed up occasionally in large firms and got handled quietly with fines and restructuring. Something structural. Something that had been built carefully and maintained deliberately over a long period of time. The kind of thing that required not just dishonest people at the top, but cooperative people all the way down and sideways, and in places that were supposed to be entirely separate from the company. He wouldn't say more on the phone. She'd understood why without him explaining it. 3 days later, he'd driven to Billings, and that was the last time she'd seen him face to face. Cole set his coffee down. He came to give you the drive. He came to give me the drive, she confirmed. He sat at my kitchen table for 2 hours. He wouldn't tell me everything that was on it. He said the less I knew, the better, that if someone came asking me questions, my confusion needed to be genuine. A dry, almost humor in her voice now. He said the only thing more believable than a good liar is an honest person telling the truth. Kid, Cole said. Brilliant kid. Evelyn said, and the pride was back for a moment. Fierce and immediate, and then it went somewhere deeper and quieter. And she looked back down at her coffee. He told me 3 things. First, the drive was the only copy. He had destroyed everything else he could find that pointed back to his investigation, because he didn't know yet how far the network extended, which agencies, and which officials, people who were supposed to be the ones you called when something like this happened. Second, he had one contact he trusted. One person he was almost certain hadn't been reached yet, Patricia Dolan, Financial Crimes Unit, Helena. She was new to that field office, only been there 7 months. Not long enough, Nathan thought, to have been identified and approached. Evelyn paused. He said it might take him a few days to make contact with her safely, and that until he did, I needed to keep the drive moving. Keep it moving, Cole repeated, his exact words. Don't stay in one place. Don't tell anyone where I was going. Use cards or my phone. Keep moving. She looked up. I was doing that right up until I ran out of road in your parking lot. Cole was quiet for a moment. Found them. The diner had its low evening noise, the clink of silverware, of a few other tables, the sound of the kitchen, steady against the windows. Normal sounds. The kind that usually meant everything was fine. He was not convinced everything was fine. You said he called you twice after that visit, Cole said. What did he say? The first call was 2 days later. Short. He said, I've made contact. She's real. It's going to be okay. Evelyn's expression did not change, but her voice tightened slightly on that last sentence, the way a voice tightens when it's carrying more weight than it wants to show. He sounded relieved, more like himself. She stopped. I thought it was going to be okay. The second call, she was quiet for a moment. The second call was 6 hours after the first one, she said. Short too, but different. She pressed her lips together. Emma, they know. Get out right now. Don't go to the police. Trust no one in suits. And then the line went dead. The diner's background sounds kept going around them. The Cole's expression had not changed. That was the last time, Evelyn said. That was 8 days ago. Cole turned his coffee cup in his hands. He had the habit of doing this when he was thinking, not fidgeting. Exactly. More the way some people needed to be doing something small with their hands when their mind was doing something large. Dex had pointed this out to him once, years ago. Cole had told him to mind his own business, had laughed for about a minute and a half. You drove straight from Billings? Cole asked. I had 20 minutes, Evelyn said. I packed what I could carry, and I left cash from my emergency savings, and I did not take my phone. She met his eyes. Nathan told me the phone was the first thing they'd tracked, so I left it on my kitchen counter, with the television still on. I took my neighbor Bernice's car. She's been in Phoenix visiting her daughter for 2 weeks, and she leaves me a key for the plants. A pause. I don't think Bernice will mind. Has anyone approached you before tonight? She said. Day 3, gas station outside of Great Falls. Came up to my window while I was paying for gas, and he said he was a state trooper, and there had been reports of an elderly woman traveling alone who might be in distress. She said this with a precision that told Cole she had replayed the conversation many times. Kind, very concerned. He asked me 3 questions. Then he asked if I had any documents or items I might be carrying for someone else. Cole looked at her. He was not a state trooper, Evelyn said flatly. How do you know? Because I grew up with a state trooper, she said. My father was a state trooper for 23 years. I know what they ask and how they ask it, and what they look like when they're genuinely worried about a person. She held his gaze. And I know what it looks like when someone is performing concern while their eyes are looking for something specific. A short pause. I told him I was visiting my sister in Missoula. I drove away slowly enough not to seem panicked, and I took the next exit and didn't stop again until dark. Cole nodded slowly. The 2 men tonight, he said. Same people, different faces, she said. Same eyes. She picked up her fork again and finished the rest of the pot roast with the deliberateness of someone who understood that food was now a strategic resource and wasting it was not an option. Cole signaled the waitress for a refill on both coffees. Outside, he could see Dex moving along the side window, a casual walk, hands in pockets, positioned with the particular spatial awareness of a man running a perimeter check. When the waitress left, Cole leaned forward slightly. I want to ask you something, and I need you to answer it straight, he said. I have been answering you straight, Evelyn said, with a precision in her tone that was not quite sharp but was definitely not soft. Cole almost smiled. The drive, he said. Nathan said it was the only copy. He's a financial investigator who found something big enough to scare himself, and he gave the only copy to his 72-year-old grandmother and told her to drive across Montana with it. He paused. Lost track? Evelyn was still for a moment. Then she set her fork down carefully. She said, it doesn't. So there's another copy. She looked at him steadily. I don't know, she said. He didn't tell me. And before you ask, I genuinely don't know, which means my confusion on the subject, if anyone asks me, will be entirely authentic. A beat. I think, and this is only what I think, is that the drive I'm carrying is the original, and that Nathan is smart enough and careful enough to have made it look like the only copy, so that whoever is chasing it is chasing me, not anyone else. The air between them shifted. Cole sat back. He sent them after you on purpose, he said. After me, Evelyn said quietly. He sent them after the drive. It just I happened to be carrying it. She looked down at her lap, where the plastic bag drive sat in her coat pocket. I think he needed time. Time to get to Patricia Dolan. Time to make sure the information reached the right people through a channel that couldn't be intercepted. Time that somebody had to buy him. She paused. He chose me because they would never expect him to choose me. Cole stared at her. He used me, she said, without bitterness in it, or rather, with a bitterness so long processed it had become something else, something clear and unsentimental. He used me because I was the best option he had. I am the person they would spend the most time underestimating. Cole was quiet for several seconds. Your grandson, he said finally. I know, she's smart, he said. I know that too. A pause. I'm still furious with him. And for the first time since she'd sat down, something in Evelyn's face shifted a crack. Not quite a smile. Not quite tears. Something living and complicated that was both of those things at the same time, and Cole recognized it as the expression of someone who loves someone too much to stop loving them, even when they have earned every bit of the anger being directed at them. He gave her a moment with it. Cole, Dex's voice from the entrance of the diner. Not loud, not alarmed. Just his name, delivered with the particular weight that meant we have a situation. Cole looked up. Dex was standing just inside the door. His face was casual. The professional casual of a man who had long ago learned that panic was a liability, but his eyes were doing something different. He gave the smallest tilt of his head toward the parking lot. Cole looked at Evelyn. Give me 30 seconds. He was up and at the door before she could answer. Outside, standing close enough to the building that they weren't visible from the road, Dex spoke quietly and fast. Sedan came back. Different parking lot hardware store 2 blocks down. Tommy spotted it when he rode the block. He paused. A pickup. Dark blue Montana plates, but the numbers were covered with mud. Tommy checked the angle. Too deliberate to be accidental. Across the street facing this direction. How long? Cole asked. Sedan's been there at least 20 minutes. Pickup showed up about 10 minutes ago. So they pulled back to regroup, Cole said, and called for backup. Dex said, this over quickly. They hadn't left. They'd reorganized, which meant they'd assessed the situation 8 Hells Angels, public location, too much visibility, and decided the direct approach was no longer viable, which meant they were waiting for something. Either a better moment or more people, or going to wait us out, Cole said. That's what I think, Dex said. We leave, they follow. She leaves alone, they grab her before she hits the county line. How many in the pickup? Tommy counted 2, sedan, probably 2, a pause. 4, plus whoever they can call. Cole looked at the parking lot. He thought about Evelyn, sitting at the table, inside with her hands around her coffee and her bad hip and her 6 days of running, and the small plastic bag drive in her coat pocket, and the 72 years of life she'd built that were now entirely secondary to the question of what happened to that drive. He thought about Nathan Carter, 29 years old, apparently brilliant, apparently terrified, who had put his grandmother in the middle of this because she was the best option he had, and who had gone silent 8 days ago, and who Evelyn had not allowed herself to believe out loud was anything other than in hiding. Cole could see in her face every time his name came up that the fear living beneath the fury was not fear about the drive or the men in suits or the next 100 miles of Montana highway. Who's closest to Helena right now? Cole asked. Dex blinked. Question he'd expected. What? Of our people. Who's closest to Helena? Dex thought for a second. Probably 2 hours out. Maybe less. He was heading up that way for the weekend. Can you reach him? Yeah. Don't call, Cole said. Text only. Clean phone. He paused. And I need you to find something for me. Looked at him. Patricia Dolan, Cole said. Federal financial crimes. Field office Helena. I need to know if she's real, and I need to know if she's reachable. The look on Dex's face went through several phases: surprise, assessment, and then the particular expressions of a man who has known another man for almost 30 years and has learned not to bother with the questions that are going to get answered in the doing. Give me 15 minutes, Dex said. Cole went back inside. Evelyn had not moved. She had both hands around the coffee mug, and she was looking at the table with the focused expression of someone thinking hard. When Cole sat back down, she looked up at him and did not ask what had happened outside because she could read the answer in the way he sat, the particular way a man sits when the situation has changed and he is already 3 moves into figuring out what to do about it. Still out there, she said. Yes. How many? 4 that we know of. She absorbed this. They're waiting. Yes. For what? Either for us to leave or for more of their own people to arrive, Cole said. Probably both. They're buying time the same way you've been buying time. Evelyn was quiet for a moment. Then she said, so what do we do? Cole looked at her, and then he said something that he would later think was probably the most important decision he made that night. Not the step forward in the parking lot, which was instinct, and not the questions he'd asked the men in coats, which was experience, but this, he told her the truth about what he was thinking, instead of telling her a version of the truth designed to make her feel better. I don't know yet, he said, but I'm working on it. Evelyn looked at him for a moment. Then she said, good, for honest to reassuring. I've noticed, Cole said. Something almost like warmth crossed her face, brief and small and gone quickly, but there. She picked up her coffee again. Then while you're working on it, she said, let me tell you the rest. More? There's always more, she said. Nathan mentioned 3 names in connection with the Meridian group. Not on the drive, he told me verbally. And he made me repeat them back to him 4 times until he was satisfied I had them right. He said the drive had the financial evidence, but these 3 names. She paused. He said these were the names of people inside the system. People who should have caught what Meridian was doing and didn't. People who were paid not to. Cole's hand stilled on his coffee cup. Verbally, he said. Not on the drive, because Evelyn said carefully, if the drive was ever recovered before it reached the right people, he didn't want those names on it. He wanted them to exist only in one place. She paused. In my head. The understanding settled over Cole like something heavy. He didn't just use you as a courier, he said. No, Evelyn said. He made you the most important part of the evidence. He made me the part that couldn't be copied or deleted or intercepted, Evelyn said. He made me the part that they would never think to worry about until it was too late. She looked at Cole steadily. 72 years old. I have a bad hip, and I forget where I put my reading glasses. I am the last person anyone looks at and thinks, there goes the key to the whole thing. A silence fell over the table. Not an uncomfortable silence, more the kind that comes after something important has been said, and both parties need a moment to let it fully land. Cole looked at this woman, at the hands still wrapped around the coffee mug, at the eyes that had been afraid in the parking lot, and were not afraid now, or rather were afraid still, but had settled the fear into something they were governing rather than something governing them. Particular quality of stillness in her posture, the stillness of someone who has accepted a situation entirely and is now purely focused on navigating it. He thought about what Nathan Carter had done, had gambled really, had taken his grandmother, the person he presumably loved most in the world, close to it, and had put her directly in the path of dangerous men. Not because he was careless with her. Cole thought, because he understood something about her that the dangerous men would never understand, that the most underestimated person in any room is very often the most formidable. He thought about how long Evelyn had been running. 6 days alone, no phone, cash only, sleeping God knows where. Bad hip, bad eyes without her glasses. Driving a borrowed car through Montana in the early days of a cold snap, making decisions at gas stations and on highway ramps that required exactly the kind of precise, quiet courage that nobody writes songs about, because it doesn't look like courage from the outside. It just looks like an old woman driving. He thought about Nathan calling with 6 hours between hope and fear. He thought about what Evelyn had not said yet, but that was present in everything she'd said, that she did not know whether Nathan was hiding, or whether Nathan was something she could not bring herself to name at a table in a diner with a stranger, no matter how steady the stranger was. 3 names, Cole said quietly. You don't have to tell me. I know, she said, but I'd like you to. She looked at him for a long moment. The calculation. Again, the real one, the deep one, the one that had nothing to do with the parking lot, and everything to do with whether she was about to trust the right person with the most important information she'd ever carried. She set her coffee mug down. The first name, she said, is a county prosecutor named Gerald Fitt. He was assigned to investigate a whistleblower complaint against Meridian 2 years ago. The investigation lasted 11 days and produced nothing. Nathan found records of 3 cash transfers to an account connected to Fitch's brother-in-law in the 6 weeks before the investigation closed. Cole listened. The second name is a regional director at the State Infrastructure Oversight Office, a man named Davis Holt. He signed off on 3 consecutive Meridian's contracts for 4 years without any of the required financial disclosures. Found records of his daughter's tuition at a private university being paid from a Meridian subsidiary account. Cole was still earns. The third name earns. Evelyn said, and here her voice changed the smallest change earns. A tightening earned. Something careful happening in it is a federal agent, a man named Roy Carver. Nathan said he was the most important name. That Carver was the one who had been running interference at the federal level, making sure the right investigations went nowhere, making sure the right people never quite got the right information. She paused, and that if Carver knew Nathan had found him, nothing, and nobody would be safe till that and the person carrying it were gone. The name sat on the table between them. Roy Carver turned it over. He had no face for it yet, no context, just a name that a 29-year-old financial investigator had been frightened enough to pass to his grandmother verbally, encrypted only in the memory of a 72-year-old woman who had kept it intact through 6 days and 2 encounters with men who might have been working for the man the name belonged to. Did Nathan say what agency? Cole asked. Federal, Evelyn said. That was all. He said federal, and he said he hadn't been able to confirm the specific division yet. That Carver had credentials, real ones. Cole sat back. He thought about the men in the parking lot, the second set of men who had arrived claiming to be federal officials, the documents that had looked real, the behavior that had not. He thought about what he'd said. Real protectors explain. All authorities verify. These men only demanded obedience. He thought about Evelyn's grandson's warning. Don't trust anyone with a badge. Not until the right people know what's on this drive. And then he thought about something else. Something that was trying to surface through everything else and was only now getting loud enough to hear clearly. Dex pushed through the diner door. He walked to their table, sat down in the empty chair, and put his phone face down between them with the particular deliberateness of a man who has found something and wants to say it right. Prisha Dolan is real, he said. She's assigned to the Helena field office. She joined 7 months ago from the Chicago division. He paused. She's also been on emergency personal leave for the past 6 days. Cole looked at him. Starting the same day, Dex said, as an anonymous tip was called into the Helena office, claiming she was under investigation for evidence tampering. The air in the diner did not change. The silverware kept clinking. Kitchen kept going. The rain kept falling. But at that table, everything went very quiet. Evelyn's face had voices go still when they've just received information that confirms the worst version of what they already suspected. They got to her, she said. Not a question. They got to her name, Cole said carefully, which means they knew Nathan had given it to someone, which means she stopped. Cole looked at her. She looked at him. And the thing she hadn't said, the thing she'd been not saying for 8 days, moved to the surface of her face for just one moment, the fear beneath the fury, the grief beneath the purpose, and mother beneath the courier. And then she put it back down, very deliberately, because she was not done yet, and she was not going to be done yet, and Nathan Carter had chosen the right person after all. What do we do? She asked. Her voice was steady. Cole looked at Dex. Dex looked at Cole. 30 years of knowing each other in that look. Turned back to Evelyn. There are 4 men outside waiting for us to make a move, he said. There's a name on your drive connected to someone with federal credentials who's been running interference for years. One contact Nathan trusted has been sidelined with a false accusation. He paused. And we are sitting in a diner in a town that nobody's heard of, and that is the first advantage we have had all night. Brown frowned slightly. How is that an advantage? Because Cole said, nobody expects the next move to start here. Did Dex again. Get Marcus on the road, he said. And the sheriff. Dex raised an eyebrow. The local one, Cole said. County, not state, the town sheriff. He held Dex's eye. I want someone without a reason to know Roy Carver's name. Dex stood up. He was already moving before he was fully out of the chair. Watched him go. then looked back at Cole. You believe me, she said. Cole said. Why? She asked, not challenging, genuinely asking. The question of a woman who had spent 6 days in a world where trusting the wrong answer could cost everything, trying to understand why the right answer had shown up wearing a leather jacket in a Montana parking lot. Cole thought about it honestly for a moment. Because the men outside didn't ask who you were, he said. They only asked for what you had. He met her eyes. Actually worried about someone. Always lead with the person. People who want something lead with the thing. He paused. You asked me to hide you. You didn't ask me to hide the drive. He was. That's the difference between someone running for their life and someone running an angle. Evelyn was quiet for a moment. That's a very perceptive thing to notice, she said. I've met a lot of people running angles, Cole said simply. She almost smiled again. The same brief, complicated almost smile as before. Cole's phone buzzed on the table. A text from a number he recognized. He read it once, read it again, and set the phone down. He looked at Evelyn. There's something you should know, he said, about the federal agents who came into the parking lot earlier. The ones with the credentials. She tensed. Barely visible, but there. My brother checked the badge numbers they flashed, Cole said. He runs a background search service legal before you ask. The badge numbers they showed belong to real agents. He paused. 2 real agents who are currently on assignment in Wyoming. Rain hit the window. The diner kept going around them. Evelyn Carter sat very still and understood what this meant, that the men who had come into that parking lot with real-looking badges had not just been bluffing. They had been using real identities, stolen credentials, which meant they had access to real federal systems, which meant Roy Carver, if he existed, Nathan's fear had been justified. It's not some peripheral figure in this, with enough reach inside the apparatus to pull names from personnel records and hand them to men in parking lots, which meant Nathan's silence was not, probably because he was hiding. Cole, Evelyn said, and her voice was different now. Not broken. Evelyn Carter was not going to break in a diner in front of a stranger, but thinner. The voice of someone holding something very heavy by pure will. I need you to tell me something. Okay, he said. Tell me the truth, she said. Not the kind truth. Truth. He looked at her for a moment. Your grandson, he said, took an enormous risk putting this in motion. He knew the risk. He was smart enough to know it. He paused. That means he also built something in some mechanism, some safety. People who are scared and smart don't set things in motion without a failsafe. He held her eyes. I don't think Nathan is finished. I think he's waiting. I think whatever he's waiting for is connected to this drive reaching the right people. He paused one more time, and I think he chose you because he knew you'd get it there. Evelyn looked at him for a long, long moment. Then she reached into her coat pocket. She pulled out the small plastic-sealed drive and set it on the table between them. Then let's get it there, she said. The pot roast came out in about 8 minutes. Evelyn hadn't realized how hungry she was until the smell hit her, something warm and deeply familiar. The kind of smell that belongs to Sunday afternoons and people you love, and her hands started shaking again, but differently this time. Not from fear, from the particular weakness that comes when your body has been running on adrenaline for 6 days, and something finally tells it that it's allowed to stop. She ate 3 bites before she said another word. Cole let her. He poured his coffee, wrapped both hands around the mug, and waited. She was already learning. A man who understood the value of silence in a way that most people didn't. He didn't fill it with small talk. He didn't check his phone. He didn't look around the diner like he was somewhere he'd rather not be. He just sat and waited and let her eat, watched the door with the particular peripheral awareness of someone who has spent a long time in situations where watching the door was not optional. Dex came in about 4 minutes after they sat down. He didn't join the table. He took a stool at the far end of the counter, ordered coffee, and opened a laminated menu he clearly had no intention of reading. 2 other Hell's Angels filtered in separately after that, taking a booth near the window, talking quietly between themselves. If Evelyn hadn't been paying attention, she might have thought it was coincidence. She was paying attention. Your friends, she said between bites. Not coming in to eat. No, Cole agreed. They're watching the parking lot. And the road, Cole said, without any particular drama about it. The fact of it, stated plainly. Evelyn set down her fork. Why are you doing this? Cole looked at her over the rim of his coffee mug. And what? This, she gestured slightly. All of this. You don't know me. You don't know I'm carrying or who's after me or whether I'm telling you the truth. You stepped in front of those men without knowing any of it, and now your people are watching the exits." She folded her hands on the table. Her voice was steady, but the question underneath it wasn't. The question underneath it was the kind that matters, the kind you ask when you've been burned before, and you need to understand the rules of the new situation before you go any further into it. You want an exchange. Cole set the mug down. She looked at him. "I mean that," he said. Nothing complicated, just nothing. You asked for help. Helping. People don't do that," Evelyn said quietly. "Not in my experience. Not without wanting something back." "Some people do," Cole said, and there was something in the way he said it, not defensive, not trying to convince her, just certain. The way you're certain about something you've tested against the world and found to be true. Evelyn picked up her fork again. She ate 2 more bites. She thought about Nathan, about the last time she'd seen him in person, 3 weeks before the call that changed everything. When he'd come to Sunday dinner and eaten 2 bowls of her soup and told her she was the best cook he'd ever known, and she'd told him he was biased, and he'd said absolutely 100% and proud of it. She pressed her lips together hard. "Tell me about your grandson," Cole said, quiet. She looked up. "Why?" "Because you've been carrying it alone for 6 days," he said. "And because you need to tell someone who's listening." There it was. There was the thing she hadn't been able to name, the thing that had been sitting on top of everything else, like a stone, not the fear, not the exhaustion, not even the weight of the drive in her coat, the aloneness of it. 6 days of not being able to say his name out loud to another human being. "Nathan," she said, "just the name first." "Nathan James Carter, 21 years old." She paused. "He was his." "I don't know." Her jaw tightened. "He is 31 years old. Graduated from the University of Montana with an accounting degree, and then he went and got a second degree in financial forensics because he said regular accounting was too boring and forensic accounting was like being a detective, except the weapon was math." A sound escaped her that was almost a laugh. He always said that. A detective with math as a weapon. Cole nodded, said nothing. "He worked for a private investigative firm for 4 years," Evelyn continued. "Then he went independent. He told me he had a client, he couldn't say who, he was very careful about that, who had asked him to look into a company called Meridian Group. He said it was a real estate investment firm, very large, a lot of money moving through it." She wrapped her hands around her own coffee cup. "He called me about 6 weeks ago and he sounded different. Scared, exactly. Focused, like he'd found something so big he had to keep reminding himself to speak slowly." She looked at Cole. "Some companies launder money. You know what that means?" She gave a short, flat nod. "I watch television. I know what it means." He said this wasn't just laundering money for one organization. He said Meridian Group was a hub, like a wheel with 100 spokes, and on the end of every spoke was someone, an official, a judge, a city council member, a law enforcement officer, someone who was being paid, someone who was supposed to be protecting people and instead was being bought. She stopped. "He wouldn't tell me the names. He said the less I knew, the safer I was. And then he called you," Cole said. "And then he called me." She nodded. 8 days ago, at 2 in the morning, I was asleep. He woke me up and I could hear that he was in a car, driving fast, and he was trying to sound calm, and he was not calm." Her hands tightened around the cup. "He said he'd found something he wasn't supposed to find, a second layer underneath everything else. He said he'd been careful, he'd been so careful, but he thought someone knew he'd seen it. He said he was coming to my house, and I needed to be awake, and I needed to be ready to take something from him and keep it no matter what." "Did he say what he'd found?" Cole asked. "The second layer." Evelyn was quiet for a moment. "Found them." The diner moved, a waitress refilling coffee at another table, the cook calling out an order, the low murmur of other conversations, the thermal texture of a normal Tuesday evening that had no idea it was sitting right next to something that was anything but normal. He said the people running Meridian Group weren't just buying officials, she said finally. He said they had a list of people who had found out, investigators, journalists, a federal agent who'd gotten too close 2 years ago. She met Cole's eyes. He said none of those people were still in a position to cause problems, and he had found the documentation showing why. Not just the fraud, and was the mechanism of what happened to people who found the fraud. Still, he drove to my house. Evelyn said. He came in the back door. He didn't even turn on the lights. He handed me the drive in the dark, and he told me to put it somewhere on my body where it wouldn't be found if someone went through my car. He told me not to call anyone from my home phone or my cell phone. He told me to just drive, not toward Billings, not anywhere obvious, and to find Patricia Dolan at the federal field office in Helena. He had her direct number written on a piece of paper. He made me memorize it. Her voice dropped. I made him a cup of tea. I told him to sit down, to wait, to sleep on the couch and figure it out in the morning. He hugged me for a long time. He said I was the strongest person he knew. He said everything was going to be fine. She stopped. Cole waited. He went out the back door, she said. I heard his car. I watched it go from the kitchen window. She looked down at her hands. That was the last time I saw him. The silence between them was the kind that had weight to it. The calls after that, Cole said. He called you twice, day and the day after, short calls. He said he was okay. He said, stay moving. He said, stop anywhere long enough to be found. She paused. The second call was shorter than the first. And at the end of it, at the very end, just before he hung up, he said, I love you, Grandma. Just like that. Out of nowhere. She picked up her fork and set it down again without using it. Nathan was not. He was not a boy who said that casually. He was loving, but he was practical. He said it on birthdays and Christmas. He did not just say it at the end of a phone call. Her voice didn't break. It just thinned the way old glass thins at the edges. I knew what it meant when he said it like that. I knew. Cole looked at her for a long moment. Then, how long did it take them to find you? The time I saw the sedan was day 3, she said. I'd been moving, Nathan said, different towns. Cash only, no patterns. And then I stopped at a gas station in Lewistown, and when I came out, they were parked 2 rows back, and I thought I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself it was nothing. She shook her head. Nathan had told me, Grandma, trust the feeling. If something feels wrong, it is wrong. Don't argue with yourself about it. He'd said it very specifically, like he was afraid I would be too reasonable. Kid, Cole said quietly. Brilliant kid, Evelyn said, with a fierceness that was suddenly and completely clear. Whatever grief was underneath her, and there was a great deal of it, it had not touched that. Pride was intact. Absolute. The smartest person I have ever known in my life. And before you say anything polite and kind, she looked at him sharply. I know grandmothers always say that about their grandchildren. I have said it myself about things they drew in preschool and grades they got in middle school. And I understand the bias. I'm telling you, Nathan was actually objectively, genuinely the most extraordinary person. She stopped. He used to sit at my kitchen table when he was 19 years old and explain the financial crisis of 2008 to me over dinner using salt shakers and spoons to represent the different banks. And by the time he was done, I understood it. A woman who balanced her checkbook with a pencil and a prayer. Another sound that almost reached a laugh. He had a gift. Cole nodded slowly, then the note. 5 words. He drove to your house in the middle of the night, and the one note he left you was 5 words. He wrote it on a Post-it, Evelyn said. Yellow. He stuck it to the inside of my kitchen cabinet, the one where I keep the mugs, so it would only be found if someone who knew my kitchen was looking for it. She paused. He knew I'd check the mug cabinet first thing in the morning, before anything else, because I always make my tea before I do anything. The detail sat in the air, the yellow Post-it in the cabinet, the morning tea, the particular intimate knowledge of a person who had spent years of Sunday mornings in that kitchen. Trust no one in suits. And below it, just below it, in smaller handwriting, 2 extra words he didn't count in the 5. He wrote, except love. Cole went very still. Trust no one in suits, she said softly, except love. She looked at her hands. I didn't know what to make of that, the second part. I still don't entirely, but I've been thinking about it for 6 days, and the only thing I keep coming back to is that he meant that love is the only thing that doesn't have a motive, the only thing that can't be bought. She looked up at Cole. He was 23 years old when his parents died. Accident, both of them at once. He came to live with me. He was the age where most boys his age wouldn't be caught dead moving in with their grandmother. He moved in without being asked. He stayed for 4 years. He fixed things around the house and drove me to my appointments and watched terrible game shows with me on Thursday nights. Her voice was completely level. He never once made me feel like I owed him anything for it. Cole picked up his coffee mug. He held it without drinking. Something in his face had shifted, something that wasn't visible exactly. Not in any single feature. It was present in the quality of his attention, the particular way he was sitting. Except love, he said, almost to himself. Evelyn said, pause. Not an uncomfortable one. Then Cole set down the mug and said, how sure are you that Patricia Dolan is safe, that she's not connected to any of this? Nathan said she was the one person he was certain of, Evelyn said. He said she'd been building a case against Meridian Group for 18 months independently, that she didn't know about his investigation, and he didn't know about hers until 4 months ago when a mutual contact connected them. He said she was careful. He said she had her own evidence, but it wasn't complete, that what was on the drive was the piece she was missing. Evelyn paused. He said that together it was enough, that separately neither of them had enough to survive what would happen when they filed. Cole said carefully. His word, Evelyn said, not mine. Cole was quiet for a moment. He turned the mug a quarter turn on the table, turned it back. And you don't know if those men in the parking lot know about Dolan. I don't know what they know, Evelyn said. I don't know how they found me. I've been careful. Nathan was specific about what careful meant, and I did everything he said. She stopped. Unless. She frowned. Unless they've been tracking Nathan's contacts from the beginning, not following me specifically, just waiting to see which of his people moved. Cole's eyes came up. If they've been watching everyone Nathan knew, she said, thinking it through out loud, it doesn't matter how careful I was following me. They were just watching for when I started moving, because Nathan made me a variable by visiting me that night. Her face changed, which means they might know about Dolan, they might not. But if they've been watching Nathan's contacts, they've been watching his communications, Cole said, which means they may already know where you're trying to go. Dropped out of the room. Not literally. Was the same as it had been 30 seconds ago. Same sounds, same smells, same Tuesday evening texture. Something shifted in the air at the table, the way pressure shifts before weather changes, and both of them felt it. Evelyn picked up the drive from her coat where she'd put it back and set it on the table between them. She looked at it like she was seeing it properly for the first time, not just as the thing Nathan had given her, as the thing Nathan had given her that might have already led them to exactly where she was trying to go. I may have made things worse, she said. You don't know that yet, Cole said. Oh, she agreed. But I'm not going to pretend it's not possible. She looked at him. If they know about Dolan, then going to Helena directly is a problem, Cole said. Yes, okay. He leaned back in his chair, crossed his arms. You said Nathan gave you her direct number. Not the office number, her direct number, yes. There's a difference, Cole said. Evelyn looked at him, not sure where he was going. An office number goes through a switchboard, Cole said. Number is her cell, her personal line. He looked at the table. Nathan gave you a way to reach her that doesn't go through official channels, which means he wasn't thinking about you walking into the field office. He was thinking about you reaching her specifically. Not as a federal agent at an official location. Evelyn stared at him. Cole looked up. Where's the number? Evelyn said. He made me say it 15 times before he left. And Cole said, don't write it down. He stood up. Don't use your phone. We'll get you a different phone, a prepaid. And you call her from that. One call, short. You tell her you have what Nathan sent. You tell her you need a meeting somewhere that isn't the office. And you get a location. He put money on the table. After that, we figure out the next step. Evelyn looked at him. It's like that? Just like that, Cole said. You make it sound straightforward, she said. I make it sound like what it is, Cole said. A problem with pieces. The pieces. She was quiet for a moment. Then you've done things like this before. It was not quite a question. Cole looked at her steadily. I've been in situations where someone needed to get from one place to another place without certain people knowing about it, he said. And I've managed it. Evelyn held his gaze. Who were you moving before? Just a beat woman, he said. Flat, factual. Drama about it. People who needed to not be found. She understood exactly what he meant. She didn't ask for more. She picked up the drive, put it back inside her coat, stood up carefully, hand on the table for balance, and straightened. She said, then let's work the pieces. And that was when Dex appeared at Cole's shoulder, coffee in hand, casual as anything, and said quietly, we got a problem. Didn't change. What kind? The sedan came back, Dex said. Lot, down the block. But there's a second car now. He paused. And the second car, Cole. The second car has got government plates. The air at the table went tight. Evelyn's hand, just reaching for her coat button, went still. Government, Cole said. Clean plates. Correct format for federal. Not fake I ran the partial. And the series checks out. Dex's voice was low and completely even, the voice of a man who had delivered serious information before, and knew that the way you delivered it mattered as much as the information itself. Two men, suits. They're not with the other car they pulled in separately, parked on the opposite side, but they're both watching the same door. Cole looked at Evelyn. Evelyn looked at Cole. Something passed between them that didn't require words. The particular understanding of a situation that has just become significantly more complicated. Because two sets of people watching the same door, arriving separately, not appearing to coordinate, that was not reassurance, not the cavalry. That was the exact thing Nathan had warned her about, the people who looked like help and weren't. Nathan said they would send people with badges, Evelyn said, low. Her voice was completely steady. He said that was the point, that you couldn't tell. Can't always, Cole agreed. He looked at Dex. Back door? Clear, Dex said. Right now. How long do we have? Not long, Dex said. Maybe 5 minutes before they reconfigure. Cole looked at Evelyn. Can you walk fast? I can walk as fast as I need to, she said, with a precision that left no room for argument. Cole nodded. He looked at Dex. Tell Reyes to pull around to the alley on the left side. Tell him quiet. Then he looked back at Evelyn and his voice dropped to just above a murmur. Here is what's about to happen. We're going to walk out the back. Stay between me and Dex. And you're not going to look at anyone or anything except where you're putting your feet. We get in the truck. Reyes has a truck. It's got nothing on it that identifies us, and we drive out the other direction. Evelyn nodded. If those men outside are legitimate, Cole said, and they're actually trying to help you, they can find us through proper channels once you've had a chance to contact Dolan and verify. He held her gaze. If they're not legitimate, if they're the other kind, then we don't give them the chance, Evelyn said. Exactly, Cole said. She looked at him for one brief moment, this man she had known for less than an hour, who had stepped in front of strangers for her without hesitating, who had listened to her talk about Nathan, with the quality of attention that cost something to give, who had worked the problem with her instead of around her. Thank you, she said. And then quiet, thank you. Cole shook his head. Thank me yet, he said. We're still in the middle of it. Through the diner, past the counter, past the cook's window, past the waitress who glanced up and then went back to her order pad and through the back door into the alley. It was still raining. Reyes had the truck idling 8 feet from the door, the side closest to them already open, and Evelyn was in the back seat with Cole beside her and Dex pulling the door shut before she'd fully registered that they were moving. No headlights until they reached the far end of the alley. Sound of pursuit. She sat back in the seat and let herself breathe. Hand found the drive inside her coat. Still there. Still sealed in its plastic bag with its 3 rubber bands. The number in your head, Cole said beside her. Dolan's number. You're certain of it? I said it to myself every morning when I woke up, Evelyn said. Every single morning for 6 days. She paused. The way I used to say my prayers. I stopped believing in those sometime in my 50s. I said Nathan's number every morning like a prayer anyway. Cole was quiet for a moment. We'll find you a phone, he said. They drove for 11 minutes through the dark, the rain still working at the windows, the truck warm and quiet inside. Evelyn watched the dark go by and thought about Nathan saying, I love you at the end of that phone call in the way he never said it casually. And she thought about the yellow post-it in the mug cabinet and the 5 words he'd written and the 2 smaller words beneath them. And she thought about the fact that somewhere in the dark outside this truck, there were people, multiple groups of people, with different plates and different suits and the same dangerous interest in what she was carrying. And she thought about Cole sitting beside her, not saying anything, not needing to say anything, just present, just there, just solid as the ground. She had spent her whole life believing certain things about certain kinds of people. She was beginning to understand that she had been wrong about one category in particular. But she didn't have the space to think about that yet. Too much still in front of them. The phone, the call, the number she'd said every morning like a prayer. Patricia Dolan, wherever she was, who may or may not have already been compromised, who Nathan had trusted with everything, and who Evelyn was about to have to decide to trust with everything too. Slowed. "We're at Reyes's place," Cole said. "He's got a landline and a clean prepaid we can use. His daughter's house, they won't think to look here." Evelyn nodded. She started to get out of the truck, and then she stopped. "Cole," she said. He looked at her. "The men with the government plates," she said, "even if they're legitimate, even if they're genuinely federal agents trying to help." She paused. "Nathan said to verify before we trusted anyone with a badge." Specific. He said, "Make sure Dolan knows first." She hesitated. "He said there was someone inside. Inside the investigation. Someone passing information back to Meridian. He said he had a suspicion, but he couldn't prove it." Cole went very still. He said, "If the wrong person found out that Dolan had the evidence before she was ready to move," Evelyn said quietly, "they wouldn't get a second chance to use it." Rain fell. Somewhere a few streets over, a dog barked twice and stopped. Cole looked at Evelyn in the dark of the truck cab, this 72-year-old woman with the drive in her coat and the number in her head and 6 days of running behind her, and more running probably still ahead, and he understood completely and with absolute clarity that the thing Nathan Carter had put in motion when he drove to his grandmother's house in the middle of the night and handed her the most dangerous object in the state was not over. They were not in the middle of the problem. They were in the middle of the real problem, the one nobody had named yet. "Someone inside," Cole said slowly. He didn't know who, Evelyn said, but he was sure. Cole sat with that for exactly 3 seconds. Then he opened the truck door. "Then we're careful about what we say on that call," he said. "And we're very careful about what we do after." He got out of the truck. Evelyn got out of the truck. The rain came down around them. And somewhere behind them, in a diner parking lot in a quiet Montana town, 2 men with government plates sat in a clean car and watched a back door that had already let something important slip through it, and neither of them picked up a phone, which was, if you knew what to look for, its own kind of answer. The rest happened fast. That was the thing nobody told you about moments, like that you spent days, weeks, sometimes years building toward them, and then when they finally came, they took about 4 minutes. Sheriff Briggs had 3 deputies with him and 2 genuine federal agents that Dolan had coordinated separately, people she trusted personally, people whose names were not in any file that Meridian Group had ever touched. They came in 2 vehicles. They did not announce themselves until they were already in position. And the men who had spent the better part of a week hunting a 72-year-old woman across the state of Montana were in handcuffs before they fully understood what had shifted. Evelyn watched it from inside Reyes's kitchen, through the window, with a cup of tea she'd made herself because her hands needed something to do. Cole stood beside her. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. When the last door of the last vehicle closed and the red and blue lights began moving away down the road, Evelyn let out a breath that felt like it had been stored in her chest for 6 days. She'd been holding it since the moment she heard Nathan's car pull away from her house in the dark. She asked. Cole was quiet for a moment. "Of it," he said. She understood what he meant. The arrests were the visible part, the part underneath the investigation, the evidence, the full weight of what Nathan had built and what Dolan would now build on top of it. That part was just beginning. It would take months, possibly longer. There would be lawyers and delays and people trying to dismantle what she'd carried across the state in a plastic bag with 3 rubber bands. That was the nature of things this size. They didn't end clean, but the men who had followed her were in custody. The drive was in Dolan's hands, and Evelyn Carter was standing in a warm kitchen with a cup of tea, which was, compared to where she'd been 24 hours ago, was something close to miraculous. "I need to find Nathan," she said. Cole nodded. "We're working on it." We surprised her even then. Even after everything that had happened in the past, hours after the truck and the call and the careful coded conversation with Dolan, after Cole had stood in a doorway while Dex ran interference and Reyes kept watch, the particular controlled chaos of getting the right information to the right people through channels that the wrong people couldn't see even after all of that, we still caught her off guard. The ease of it, the naturalness, as if he'd been thinking of them as a unit for longer than she had. She didn't say anything about it, but she noticed it, and she held it carefully like something that could break if handled without care. Dolan came inside about 20 minutes later, the compact woman in her 40s, dark hair pulled back, the kind of face that told you nothing she didn't want it to tell you. She had the quality of someone who had spent a long time in rooms where showing too much cost you something, and who had learned to keep the important things internal where they were safe. She sat across from Evelyn at the kitchen table, and she put her hands flat on the surface. She looked at Evelyn with something in her face that was not quite gratitude and not quite relief, but was something that sat directly between them and was bigger than either. "Nathan told me about you," Dolan said. Evelyn looked at her. "What did he say?" "He said you were the only person he trusted completely." Dolan paused. "He said if he ever had to give the drive to anyone, he would give it to you, because you were the kind of person who didn't stop when things got hard. He said you were stubborn in the best possible way." Evelyn was quiet for a moment. "Where is he?" she asked. Her voice was level, but just barely. "I need you to tell me where he is." Evelyn held her gaze. "Nathan is alive," she said. The words landed in the kitchen like something physical. Evelyn put one hand flat on the table, went to her chest, briefly, mandibles, automatically, as if checking to make sure her heart was still doing what hearts were supposed to do. "He's alive," Dolan said again. "He's been in protective custody for 5 days. There was a situation. His cover was compromised more completely than he realized, and the decision was made quickly to get him somewhere safe before we'd had a chance to reach you." She stopped. "That was a failure on our part. You should never have been in this alone. He should have had more time to prepare you for what might happen." "I'm sorry for that. Where is he?" Evelyn said. "Still level, still controlled. The control of someone who has held themselves together through 6 days of running and is not about to let go now when it matters most." "He's 2 hours from here," Dolan said. "I can take you to him tonight." Evelyn nodded once. Then she pressed her lips together and she looked at the table and she breathed carefully, in and out, the way Cole had told her to breathe in the parking lot a lifetime ago. Cole, who had been standing at the edge of the kitchen giving them space, watched her. He saw the exact moment the control held and the exact cost of holding it, and he said nothing, which was exactly the right thing. 2 hours, Evelyn said, and her voice was steady enough. Dolan confirmed. Evelyn nodded. She picked up her tea. She set it down without drinking. She looked up at Dolan and said, "The person inside, the one Nathan thought was passing information back to Meridian. Do you know who it is?" Dolan's face went still in a particular way. Strong suspicion. "Were they here tonight?" Evelyn asked. "Were they one of the people involved in the arrests?" And looked at her, a long look, measuring. "Why do you ask?" "Because Nathan told me they had a suspicion but couldn't prove it," Evelyn said. "And I want to know whether tonight gave you the proof." Quiet for exactly 4 seconds. Then she said, "Yes." Evelyn held that. Then she nodded. "Good," she said quietly. "It's done." It wasn't a triumphant word. It was the word of someone who has been carrying a very heavy thing for a very long time and has just been told they can set it down. She looked across the kitchen at Cole. He met her eyes. Neither of them said anything. They didn't need to. Something shifted quietly in the air of that kitchen, something that had nothing to do with the investigation or the arrests or the drive or any of it. Something smaller and more personal than all of that. Something that had been building since a parking lot in the rain. Since a woman grabbed a stranger's sleeve and whispered 3 words, and a man stepped forward without asking why. Cole looked away first. He looked at the floor. His jaw moved slightly, the way jaws move when people are choosing what they're going to feel and what they're going to save for later, somewhere private. And Evelyn saw it and understood it and filed it away in the part of herself that noticed things about people and remembered them. She would ask him about it later. Not a night, but later. The drive to where Nathan was took 2 hours and 7 minutes, and Evelyn spent most of it in the back of Dolan's vehicle looking out the window at the dark Montana countryside going past. Sat in the front. A second agent drove. Cole followed in Reyes's truck, not because Dolan had asked him to, because when they'd walked out of the kitchen and Evelyn had paused at the door and glanced back at him, he'd said, "I'll follow," and that had been that. Had raised an eyebrow. Cole had said, simply, "She's been alone for 6 days." And Dex had said nothing because there was nothing to say to that. They pulled up to what appeared from the outside to be a completely ordinary house on a completely ordinary street in a small town that Evelyn would later not be able to name with any certainty. Agents here too, plainclothes, positioned in ways that only someone trained to look for them would notice. Dolan led Evelyn to the front door. She knocked twice in a specific pattern. Opened. The door opened. And Nathan Carter, 31 years old, her grandson, the boy who had sat at her kitchen table at 19, explaining the financial crisis with salt shakers, who had moved in without being asked after the accident and stayed 4 years and watched terrible game shows with her. On Thursday nights, who had called her at 2 in the morning and told her she was the strongest person he knew, was standing in the doorway. He looked exhausted. He had a cut above his left eyebrow, healed over but recent enough to still be visible. He was too thin in the way that people get when they've been somewhere stressful for too long, without access to anything resembling comfort. He had his mother's eyes blue-gray, like Evelyn's, like something that ran in the blood, and they were bright with something so large it hadn't quite organized itself into an expression yet. "Emma," he said. Evelyn had held herself together through 6 days of running, through 2 men in a parking lot, through fake federal agents and real ones who might have been fake, through a prepaid phone and a coded call, and the arrest of people who had wanted to make her disappear. Through the news that Nathan was alive, delivered flat and careful across a kitchen table, while she kept her breathing even and her hands still. She held herself together until Nathan said "Grandma," and then she walked through the door and put her arms around him, and she held on with the grip of someone who had been counting the miles between them and was finally done counting, and she did not cry. She still did not cry, because she was Evelyn Carter, and she had not cried in front of anyone since 1987. And she was not about to start now, but she held on for a very long time. And Nathan held on back, and neither of them said anything at all for a while. Behind her, Cole stood at the end of the walk. He had gotten out of the truck. He stood with his hands in his jacket pockets, and he watched the doorway where an old woman and her grandson were holding each other in the light of a safe house in the middle of nowhere, and something moved across his face that lasted about 3 seconds before he put it somewhere internal where it belonged, materialized beside him from nowhere in particular, which was Dex's primary skill. Dex asked. "Yeah," Cole said. "You sure?" "Go back to the truck, Dex." "Just asking." "Go back to the truck." Dex went back to the truck, but he was smiling when he went. The next hour was a particular kind of organized chaos. Team needed a debrief. Nathan had questions and information and more questions, formal statements and chain of custody procedures for the drive and the particular bureaucratic machinery that kicks into gear when 6 days of running suddenly become an official federal operation. Evelyn sat through all of it with the patient endurance of a woman who had been patient through considerably worse. She answered every question they asked her. She described every encounter, every car, every face she could remember, every decision she had made and why. When they asked her how she had managed to evade detection for 6 days with no prior experience in evasion of any kind, she said, "My grandson told me to trust the feeling." I trusted the feeling. When they asked her how she had wound up with Cole Harrison and the Hells Angels, she said, "I ran out of options and I made a choice. It turned out to be the right choice." When Nathan, sitting across the table from her, that part of the story, the parking lot, the 2 men in expensive coats, the sleeve she'd grabbed, the step Cole had taken, he put one hand over his face for a moment, not from distress, from something that started in his chest and worked its way up before he got it back under control. "Grabbed a Hell's Angel," he said. "The biggest one I could reach," Evelyn said. "Emma." "Nathan, I had approximately 4 seconds and no good options." He looked at her across the table. His eyes were doing that thing again, the thing that was too large to be one single feeling. "I told you to find someone who had nothing to hide." "Yes," she said. "I did not specify Hell's Angels." She said. "You left that to my judgment." He stared at her. Then he made the sound that had been building, since she'd arrived, the one she'd heard from him as a boy, when something was both terrible and funny in equal measure, and he laughed. A short, real, helpless laugh, the kind that comes from places in your chest you haven't been able to reach for a while. And Evelyn watched her grandson laugh, and she thought, there he is. Still intact, still whole, still the boy with his mother's eyes and his father's laugh, and whatever it was he'd gotten from her that made him stubborn in the best possible way. "Where is he?" Nathan asked, when he'd gotten himself back. Harrison, is he here? Outside, Dolan said. He stayed. Nathan looked at Dolan. I want to talk to and looked at Evelyn. Evelyn looked at Nathan. Go ahead, Evelyn said. Cole came in from the truck when Dex knocked on the window and said Nathan Carter wanted a word. He came inside with the same quality he always moved with, unhurried, not making himself smaller than he was, not making himself larger either. Just present. Nathan was standing in the entryway when Cole came through the door. Nathan was 6 feet even, was not a small man by most standards. Cole still had 4 inches and roughly 80 pounds on him. And Nathan looked at him the way you look at something that is significantly different from what you imagined when you heard the story. Harrison, Nathan said. Cole said. Nathan held out his hand. Cole shook it. She told me what you did, Nathan said. And after? Cole said nothing. I gave her a list of things to watch for, Nathan said. Flags. Signs that someone was lying or performing. I gave her a whole mental checklist of how to identify people she could trust. He stopped. She threw out the checklist. Did she? Cole said. She grabbed your sleeve, Nathan said. That's it. That's the whole process. Sometimes that's the right process, Cole said. Nathan looked at him for a moment. Then he said quietly, I spent 4 months building a case that I thought was going to protect her. Protocols, backup plans, contingencies. He paused. She blew through all of them in the first 3 days, and then found a better solution in a parking lot in about 45 seconds. She's a remarkable woman, Cole said. She raised me, Nathan said, with a simplicity that held everything. She is. Cole nodded. Nathan looked at him for another moment. The men who came at you in the parking lot, there were 2 of them, and 2 more with government plates later, Cole said. The 2 in the parking lot were private contractors, Nathan said. Meridian's internal security. They're in custody now. He paused. The 2 with the government plates, one of them was legitimate, was the person inside. He looked at Cole carefully. If you hadn't gotten her out the back. We got her out the back, Cole said. If you hadn't, Nathan. Cole said, and his voice was gentle about it, the gentleness of a man who understood where the thought was going and what it cost. She's here. Here. We're having this conversation. The rest of it is the version of events that didn't happen. Nathan was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded slowly. She said, you told her to breathe, he said. She looked like she needed to, Cole said. She never lets anyone tell her what to do, Nathan said. She was having a hard week, Cole said. Nathan almost smiled. Of it was significant, the particular almost of a person who has been in a place where almost smiling was the best you could do for a while, and who is just now remembering that the full version is available. Thank you, Nathan said. He said it without preamble or decoration, or the particular verbal padding that people use when they're embarrassed by gratitude. Direct and full. Cole looked at him. She chose us, he said simply. We didn't do anything except not let her down. They stood there for a moment in the entryway of the safe house, the financial investigator and the Hell's Angel, and something passed between them that was not friendship exactly, was too new and too strange for that word, but was something real. The particular recognition of 2 people who had been on opposite sides of the same thing and had ended up somehow facing the same direction. The weeks that followed were not quiet. Nothing about what came next was quiet. Meridian Group investigation became the kind of news story that grew daily, new names emerging, new layers of the fraud revealed. Nathan had described to Evelyn, with the 100 spokes, slowly dissembling in public in ways that made people in several states very uncomfortable. Additional arrests. There were congressional briefings. The federal prosecutor who gave a press conference that lasted 45 minutes and used the word unprecedented 4 times. Evelyn watched it on the television in her living room in Billings, with Nathan sitting on the couch beside her. He had come home 3 days after the safe house. He had sat at her kitchen table and eaten 2 bowls of soup, the chicken soup, with wide egg noodles and too much dill, the one he'd always said was the only soup worth eating. And then he'd fallen asleep on the couch and slept for 11 hours. And Evelyn had turned off the television and pulled the blanket from the back of the recliner and put it over him and stood there for a moment, just looking at him sleeping, the way she watched him sleep when he was 23 and newly orphaned and had moved into her spare room and was too proud to show anyone how shattered he was. She'd been then what she was now, the thing that did not leave. Cole came to Billings on a Thursday. He'd called first the first time he'd called since the night of the arrests. He'd gotten the number from Dex, who had gotten it from Reyes, who had gotten it from the kind of informal information network that didn't have a name but functioned reliably. He'd called and said he was passing through and wanted to check in, and was that all right? Evelyn had said come for lunch. He'd arrived at noon with his bike in the street and Dex idling 2 blocks back, and a container of something he described as peach cobbler that his sister had made. Evelyn had looked at the cobbler and at Cole and said she hadn't expected that. What did you expect? He asked. I don't know, she said. Not peach cobbler. My sister makes it for everyone the first time they come over, he said. She didn't come herself because she said she'd make it weird, but she wanted to. Evelyn looked at the cobbler. Your sister knows about me? My sister knows everything, Cole said. There's no keeping anything from her. It's not possible. I've tried. Evelyn put the cobbler on the counter and told him to sit down. He sat at the kitchen table, the same kitchen table where Nathan had explained the financial crisis with salt shakers, the same table where the yellow post-it in the mug cabinet had been waiting for her when all of this started. She made coffee and brought 2 cups to the table and sat across from Cole Harrison in her own kitchen in Billings, Montana, and they talked for 3 hours. Not about Meridian, not about the arrests, not about any of it, about simple things. His sister, who lived in Spokane and made cobbler and apparently knew everything. A dog he'd had for 11 years named Freight, who had died 2 winters ago and who he still thought about when it snowed. The year he'd started riding at 19, which had not been a good year in ways he described briefly and without self-pity, and moved past. A song his mother used to hum while she cooked that he still couldn't hear without feeling it somewhere in his ribs. Evelyn told him about her husband, Robert, who had been gone for 9 years and who she still talked to when the house was very quiet. About the garden she kept, the one she'd fainted in that time, which was still her favorite place to be at 5 in the morning before the world woke up. About the first time she'd held Nathan, 2 days after he was born, when his mother, Evelyn's daughter, had put him in her arms and said, Mom, look at what we made. Cole listened the way he'd listened in the diner, without filling silence that didn't need filling, without making it about himself when it wasn't about him, with the quality of attention that cost something to give and that she'd already learned to recognize as one of his most essential features. At the end of the 3 hours, when the coffee was long gone, and she'd put out cheese and crackers because it seemed wrong to let a person sit at your table that long without feeding them, Cole said, I want to ask you something, Evelyn said. In the parking lot, he said. You grabbed my sleeve. What made you decide it was us? Specifically, aloud, and we looked intimidating, and you knew our name and what that name meant. He looked at her steadily. What made you choose us instead of going into the diner and trying to blend in? Evelyn thought about it, really thought about it, the way she hadn't had time to in the moment, the way she'd too busy surviving to examine. Aloud, she said finally, but you were laughing. That man, the one with his head thrown back, he was laughing at something real, not performing, not watching to see who was watching him. She paused. The men following me, they never laughed. In 6 days, every time I saw them, they never laughed at anything. And maybe that's nothing. Maybe that's the most foolish thing I've ever used to make a decision. She met his eyes, but it wasn't nothing to me. Cole was quiet for a moment. He said, that's not foolish, no? No, he said. It's the thing Nathan put in the note. That's what it means. He looked at her. People performing are too busy performing to forget themselves. People who forget themselves and laugh. He stopped. Not about it. They're just people. Evelyn looked at him. She said, yeah, Cole said. She nodded slowly. And then, time in a very long time, for the first time in a way that reached all the way down and was not controlled, was not strategic, and was not held in check by the particular disciplines of a woman who had been keeping herself together through one impossible thing after another. Evelyn Carter smiled. Not a small, careful smile, a real one, the kind that changes the whole face. Cole saw it. Something happened in his expression that he didn't bother to manage. Come back sometime, she said. Nathan wants to meet you properly, not in a safe house, in a real place. I'll come back, Cole said. Bring the cobbler again, she said. Or your sister, either one. Stood up from the table. She walked him to the door. He stopped on the front step and looked back at her, this enormous man in his leather jacket with his Hells Angels patch and his 15 years of road and his dog named Freight, who died 2 winters ago, and he looked at her with something in his face that she recognized because it was the same thing she felt, the particular weight of having been part of something that mattered. You know, she said, holding the door frame, when I was running across that parking lot, I thought I was choosing danger because I had no other option. I looked at her. I was wrong, she said. I was choosing the safest place in town. I just didn't know it yet. Cole held her gaze for a long moment. Then he nodded once, and he walked down the front steps toward the street, and Evelyn stood in her doorway and watched him go. And the town of Billings, Montana, went about its ordinary Thursday in complete ignorance of the fact that something extraordinary had just sat at a kitchen table for 3 hours and drunk coffee and eaten cheese and crackers and talked about a dog named Freight and a song mother used to hum and a garden where an old woman talked to her dead husband in the early morning quiet. The ordinary texture of it, the complete simplicity, the thing that had been there all along, everything else, underneath the fear and the drive and the arrests and the investigation and the 100 spokes of the wheel and all of it. Just people sitting at a table choosing to be kind. The idea started with Nathan, not in any grand or official way. He was. It started the way most things that matter start, quietly, at a kitchen table, over coffee that had gone slightly cold because the conversation was more important than the temperature of the drink. It was a Saturday morning, about 3 months after everything. Nathan had driven up from his new apartment in Helena. He'd moved there to be closer to Dolan's office during the ongoing trial proceedings, a temporary arrangement that had quietly become permanent in the way temporary arrangements sometimes do when a person finds they belong somewhere they didn't expect. He'd arrived the night before, eaten dinner with Evelyn, watched half of a terrible game show with her, and fallen asleep in the recliner, which made Evelyn smile in a way she didn't bother to hide. He sat across from her with his coffee and said, I want to do something. Evelyn looked at him. That's a broad statement, I know. He turned the mug in his hands. All of this, everything that happened, it's going to become a case file, a set of indictments, a legal proceeding that most people will hear about through a news story they half read on their phone during their lunch break. He looked up, and that's important. That matters. But it's not, he stopped. It doesn't capture what actually happened. It doesn't capture what you did, Cole did, what any of it actually meant. Nathan, Evelyn said carefully, what are you proposing? There are a lot of people like you, he said. Older people who've been targeted, exploitation, financial fraud, elder abuse, people who get pressured into things they don't understand because someone with a smooth voice and an expensive suit decides they're an easy mark. He met her eyes, an easy mark, but most people in your situation would have been. Evelyn was quiet. I want to organize something, Nathan said. An event. A charity ride, motorcycles, awareness, fundraising for victims of financial exploitation and elder abuse. Something visible. Something that says, he paused, searching for the words, something that says the people you'd least expect are the ones who show up. Evelyn looked at her grandson for a long moment. Have you talked to Cole? She asked. Not yet, Nathan said. I wanted to talk to you first. She nodded slowly, turned her own mug in her hands. Outside, the early morning was doing what little mornings in Billings did in October, cold and quiet, the kind of quiet that had texture to it, that felt like something, rather than just the absence of sound. He'll say yes, she said finally. You think so? He stepped in front of strangers in a parking lot in the rain. For a woman he'd never met, she said. Yes, Nathan. He'll say yes to a charity ride. Nathan called Cole that afternoon. The session lasted 11 minutes, which Nathan reported afterward with the slightly stunned expression of a man who had prepared for a negotiation and found no one on the other side of the table wanting to negotiate. He said yes. In the first 30 seconds, Nathan told Evelyn. No, she said. He said Dex was already going to say yes before he even asked him. I assumed. He said his sister wants to run the registration table. Evelyn looked up. He told his sister? Apparently she calls him every Sunday, Nathan said. He tells her everything. Evelyn thought about that, about the man who said his sister knew everything, and there was no keeping anything from her, about the way he'd said it, not with embarrassment, but with a kind of tired affection that told you everything about what that relationship actually was. She thought about the cobbler the sister had sent and the note that had said she hadn't come herself because she'd make it weird, and she thought that she very much wanted to meet this woman someday. Good, Evelyn said. Then it settled. What followed was 3 months of the particular organized chaos of putting together something that had never been done before in the way they were trying to do it. Nathan handled the logistics, permits, routes, nonprofit filings, coordination with victim advocacy organizations across the state. Dolan quietly connected them with 3 additional federal programs that supported elder fraud victims and agreed to have representatives present. Cole handled the rider community, not just his own chapter, but the broader network, riders from 3 states who heard about it through channels that operated faster than any official communication system and with considerably less paperwork. The sheriff who had helped the night of the arrests, a compact, steady man named Ben Briggs, who had turned out to be exactly what he appeared to be, which Evelyn noted privately was rarer than it should have been, agreed to speak at the event. He called Nathan and said he'd been in law enforcement for 26 years. And the night in question was one of the 3 nights in those 26 years that he was most proud of. Nathan told Evelyn. Evelyn filed it in the part of herself that kept the things worth keeping. The date was set for the 2nd Saturday in November. Cold, possibly, but clear according to the extended forecast. Out through the valley and back, 42 miles, ending in the parking lot of the community center where there would be food and speakers and tables set up for the organizations involved. Entry fee, with all proceeds going directly to the Montana Elder Fraud Assistance Fund, which Nathan had helped establish through a contact at the state attorney general's office the week before the event. Something started happening that none of them had planned for. People called, not riders, regular people. A woman who had run the flower shop on Main Street for 30 years called Nathan and said she'd heard about the ride and she wanted to donate the flowers for the event tables. And who owned the same diner. The one from that first night called and said he wanted to provide food for the after event. When Nathan pointed out that the after event was in Billings, which was not close to his diner, the man said he'd drive it up himself and he didn't want to hear any argument about it. A local newspaper ran a small story. The story was picked up by a regional outlet. The regional outlet version was shared online and traveled in the way things travel when they catch something real. In people, not virally, not explosively, but steadily, the way water moves, finding channels and spreading through them. By the Thursday before the event, registration for riders had passed 400. Nathan called Cole and said the number. And there was a pause on the other end of the line. 100, Cole said. And counting, Nathan said. Another pause. Dex is going to lose his mind, Cole said. He's been coordinating the route logistics for 150. I know, Nathan said. We'll handle it, Cole said. Worry about the logistics. You worry about the program. Nathan worried about both because Nathan was Nathan. He did it quietly and without involving anyone else in the worrying, which Evelyn recognized as a family trait and told him so when he called her at 10:30 Thursday night to run through the run-of show for the 4th time. Nathan, she said. I know, he said. Go to sleep. I will, Nathan. I said I will. You're going to be fine, she said. All of it is going to be fine. There was a pause. How do you know? Because I've been on the hard side of this, she said quietly. And this is the easy side. This is the part where we get to do something good with what happened to us. She paused. That's not hard. That's a gift. Go to sleep. He went to sleep. Saturday came cold and clear, the forecast having delivered exactly what it promised. Evelyn was at the community center at 7:30 in the morning, 2 hours before anyone was supposed to arrive, because she could not sleep past 5, and the house was quiet, and she had things she wanted to check on. Cole's sister, whose name turned out to be Sandra, and who was exactly as vivid a personality as Evelyn had imagined based on the cobbler, was already there, having driven from Spokane the night before, and she was setting up the registration table with an efficiency that Evelyn recognized and admired. Sandra Harrison was 51, 2 years younger than Cole, and she had his eyes and none of his economy of expression. She talked where he was quiet and moved fast where he was deliberate, and she had apparently been told the complete and detailed story of everything that had happened, because she looked at Evelyn when she came through the door and said, "Oh, I have been wanting to meet you for 3 months, and hugged her before Evelyn had fully processed that a hug was incoming. Evelyn, who was not a woman who hugged casually, found that she did not mind. He talked about you, Sandra said, pulling back and looking at her with the particular directness of a woman who had decided they were going to be friends and was simply notifying Evelyn of the fact. After that night, he called me Sunday morning. He always calls Sunday morning, and he was different. I could hear it. Different how? Evelyn asked. Sandra thought about it. Like something had settled, she said. Cole carries a lot. He's been carrying it for a long time. Some of it I know about. Some of it he keeps inside because that's his way. She looked at Evelyn steadily. After that night, something in it settled. I don't know how else to say it. Evelyn didn't know what to do with that, exactly. So she filed it in the keeping place and said, he's a good man. He really is, Sandra said, even when he makes it difficult to notice. By 9:30, the parking lot was full. Not just riders, though there were riders everywhere. A controlled energy of 412 people on motorcycles assembling into something organized. The sound of it, the buzz, the presence of it, filling the air in a way that was impossible to ignore. Families, children, older couples who had come to watch, people from the town who had heard and come without planning to stay and found themselves staying anyway. A news crew from the billing station who set up near the start line and pointed a camera at the crowd with the expression of people who had come expecting something modest and found something else entirely. Evelyn stood near the microphone that had been set up at the front of the gathered crowd, and she looked out at 412 motorcycles and the families around them and the news camera and the flowers from the florist on Main Street and the food that the diner owner had driven up himself. And she felt something move through her that she didn't have a precise word for. Pride, bigger than pride. Not gratitude, though it contained gratitude. Bigger than that too. The particular feeling of watching something that started in desperation and fear transform through a sequence of human choices into something that gave instead of took, into something that added to the world instead of removing from it. Nathan appeared at her elbow. He was wearing a jacket that was slightly too thin for the weather, which she noted and decided not to comment on. I'm 12, he said. I know, she said. Was. 3 months ago, you were running from 2 men in a parking lot. I know that too, she said. He looked out at the crowd. How does it feel? She thought about it honestly. Like the world is larger than I remembered, she said. I think I'd let fear make it small. The running, it does that. It contracts everything down to the next step, the next decision, the next threat. Stop seeing the rest. She paused. This is the rest. Nathan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I wrote something. Beach. I want to read it to you first. She looked at him. I wrote about you, he said, about what you did, about what it meant. He pulled a folded paper from his jacket pocket. Tell me if it's too much. He read it to her quietly, standing beside the microphone in the cold morning air, his voice low and slightly rough in the way it got when he was controlling something. It was 4 paragraphs. It was precise and unadorned, and it said the truth without decoration. He finished. Evelyn was quiet for a moment. It's not too much, she said. He folded the paper back, looked at her. You're sure? She said. Read it. Cole arrived with the chapter at 9:45, which was 5 minutes later than he'd said, and which Dex had apparently been vocal about for the entire last stretch of road, based on the expression on Cole's face when he pulled up and the expression on Dex's face behind him. Sandra saw her brother from across the parking lot, and her face did the thing it did, broke open into something that was too big to be called a smile, and Cole saw her, and something happened in his face that matched it. The family frequency, the particular light that only certain specific people can turn on in you. He walked over to where Evelyn was standing. You ready? He asked. I've been ready for an hour, she said. You're the one who's late. 5 minutes, he said. 5 minutes is late, she said. He looked like he was going to argue, and then didn't. You look good, he said instead. I know, she said, which made him almost smile in the way she'd learned to read the almost. That was as good as the full thing if you knew what to look for. The program began at 10. Sheriff Briggs spoke first. He talked about the night of the arrests with a plainness that gave it weight, no dramatic language, no unnecessary inflation, just the facts of what had happened and what they meant and what he'd understood from them that he hadn't understood before. He talked about what it meant when a community took care of its own people and what it meant when the definition of community was wider than the one people carried in their heads. He got through most of it, and then near the end, his voice went briefly rough, and he stopped for a second, and the crowd was completely still, and then he finished. Dolan spoke next. She was precise and factual in the way federal agents are when they're speaking publicly, careful with language, careful with boundaries. But at the end, she said something that was neither precise nor careful in the bureaucratic sense. She said that in 18 months of investigating Meridian Group, the piece she had been missing was carried across the state by a woman who had never investigated anything in her life, who had been given 6 days' notice and no training and no backup and no map. She said that woman was one of the most effective people she had ever worked with. She said she wanted that on the record. The crowd responded to that. Nathan spoke third. He read the 4 paragraphs, the ones he'd read to Evelyn beside the microphone, the precise and unadorned truth of it. He did not make it dramatic, he made it clear. There is a difference, and he understood it. And then he said, I want to introduce the woman who made all of this possible. Not because she was trained for it, not because she was fearless. Fearless. She was terrified every single day. She made it possible because she was stubborn enough to keep moving when fear told her to stop, and because when she ran out of options, she made a choice that most people never would have made. He looked at Evelyn, my grandmother, Evelyn Carter. She walked to the microphone. Out was the quiet. She stood there for a moment and looked at them, 412 riders, and the families around them, and the people who'd come without planning to stay. And she thought about 6 days of sleeping in her car and crackers and water from gas stations and checking the rearview mirror until her neck ached. She thought about a parking lot in the rain and a leather sleeve and 3 words she'd said to a stranger. She thought about the yellow Post-it in the mug cabinet and the 5 words and the 2 smaller words underneath them. She thought about Robert, husband, gone 9 years, who she still talked to when the house was quiet. She thought about what he would have made of this. She knew exactly what he would have made of it. He would have stood in the back of this crowd with his hands in his pockets, and that look he got, the quiet of it was private look, the one he saved for moments when he was proud of her, but knew better than to make a fuss about it. And he would have said afterward at home, just the 2 of them, oh, that's my girl. She gripped the microphone. I spent my whole life, she said, believing that protection came from people who looked respectable, the right titles and the right offices and the right suits. I trusted the form of things. She paused. I was wrong. Not about everything, but about that. She looked toward Cole, who was standing near the back of the crowd with his arms crossed. He met her eyes. The man everyone warned me about was the man who stood in front of me when nobody else did. He didn't ask who I was. He didn't ask what I'd done or whether I deserved help. He just stepped forward because someone asked him to. The crowd was completely still. I want to say something to the people here today who are older, she said, who maybe, like me, have spent a long time believing that the world is divided into the safe and unsafe in the ways you were taught when you were young. The suits and the patches, the respectable and the not. She gripped the microphone a little tighter. It's not divided that way. I promise you it's not. The man who followed me across the state in a black sedan wore a very nice coat. The man who stopped him wore a leather jacket with a patch on the back. She let that sit for a moment. Turns the action, not the coat. She looked out at the crowd for a moment. Then she turned and looked at Cole again. He was looking at the ground now, the way he did when something was happening in his chest that he was choosing not to show. She'd learned that about him in the months since the parking lot. The looking down was not indifference. It was the opposite of indifference. She reached into her coat pocket. She had been carrying it for 3 weeks, deciding whether this was the right moment, deciding and undeciding and deciding again. Small chain, the simple metal attached to it, plain silver, worn smooth from years of handling. Robert had worn it for 37 years. She'd put it on his wrist herself in the hospital at the end, and when he was gone, she'd kept it, and she'd worn it herself for 3 years and then put it away in the small jewelry box on her dresser because some things were too heavy to wear every day but too important to bury. She'd taken it out 3 weeks ago when she was thinking about this moment. She walked away from the microphone, across the space between her and Cole, and the crowd watched and did not make a sound. Cole looked up when he heard her coming. He read something in her face and straightened slightly, and then he looked at what was in her hand, and something happened in his expressions that was complicated and private and very real. She stopped in front of him. "This belonged to my husband," she said. Quiet. Just for him, though 412 people were close enough to hear. He was not a large or intimidating man. He was a high school history teacher for 31 years. He wore this every day. She turned it over in her hand. He believed in showing up. That was his whole philosophy. Show up, tell the truth, and don't make people feel small. He said everything else followed from those three things. Cole looked at the chain in her hand. "You showed up," Evelyn said. "You told the truth about what you saw those men." Answers: Harmon, Montana. The corners of her mouth moved. "You didn't make me feel small. Not once. Not when I was shaking and grabbing your sleeve in the rain. Not when I didn't trust you yet. Not when I was asking you what you wanted in exchange." She held the chain out to him. "I would like you to have this." Cole looked at it for a long moment. His jaw moved. He looked at her, and whatever was in his face was not something she had a name for. But she recognized it, the way you recognize something you've been looking for, without knowing you were looking. And he said, "I can't take that." "You can't," she said, "because I'm giving it to you, and because Robert would have liked you very much." She paused. "He would have gotten on one of those motorcycles with you, given half a chance. He always wanted one. I never let him." Something shifted in Cole's face. "Real thing. Why not?" "Because I was afraid he'd get hurt," she said. "I spent a lot of years being afraid." She lifted the chain slightly. "I'm done with that." Cole looked at the chain. He looked at her. He reached out slowly and took it from her hand. He turned it over once. He looked at it for a moment with his head slightly bowed, and the crowd was so quiet that the wind coming through the parking lot was the loudest thing there was. "Thank you," he said. "Not just for the chain." They both understood that. "Thank you," she said back. "Not just for the parking lot." He understood that, too. Sandra, somewhere in the crowd, was crying without bothering to hide it. Standing near the bikes, was looking at the sky with the expression of a man who is absolutely not also doing that. Nathan, beside the microphone, had the folded piece of paper in his hands and was looking at his grandmother with the particular expression he'd had since he was 23 and newly arrived in her spare room, the one that said, "I don't know what I would do without you, and I'm not going to think about it." Cole put the chain in his jacket pocket. He pressed his hand briefly against the pocket. The way you press your hand against something you want to feel is still there. Then he looked at Evelyn, and something in his face opened up into an expression she hadn't seen from him before. Not the almost smile, not the quiet watching, not the controlled steadiness that was his default mode in difficult situations. Something warmer, something that had been underneath all of it, waiting for the right moment to surface. Out his hand, not for a handshake, palm up. She looked at it. Then she put her hand in his. His hand was large and had old scars on the knuckles and was very warm, and he held hers carefully. The way you hold something that matters. And they stood like that for just a moment, this enormous leather-jacketed man and the small 72-year-old woman who had grabbed his sleeve in a parking lot in the rain and changed both their lives, began to applaud. Not an explosion it built, the way real things build, from the people nearest them outward, until the whole parking lot was part of it, and the sound filled up all the available space and went out into the cold November air and over the rooftops of Billings, Montana. The ride went out at 11. 412 motorcycles, plus several dozen more who had shown up, registering and been waved in anyway. The sound of them moving out together was something you felt before you heard it, a vibration in the ground, a pressure in the chest, the particular frequency of a large group of people doing one thing at the same time in the same direction. Evelyn stood at the edge of the parking lot and watched them go. Nathan stood beside her. He put his arm around her shoulder. She leaned into him slightly, the way she had when he was smaller, and the habit had been different when she had been the one holding him up. The roles reversed so gradually that you didn't notice until they were fully turned. "They're going to do good work today," Nathan said. "They're already doing it," she said. She watched the last of the motorcycles clear the lot. The sound of them diminished gradually, not all at once. A slow fading that took a while to complete. When it was quiet again, Nathan said, "I've been thinking about what you said the night before the event. About the world being larger than you remembered." "Yes," she said. I think that's what he gave you, Nathan said. The coal, not just protection. He gave you that back. The size of it. He paused. You were running, and you were scared, and the world had gotten very small. And then someone showed up and made it bigger again. He looked at her. That's not nothing. That's everything, actually. Evelyn was quiet for a moment. He showed me what your father showed me, she said finally. Grandfather showed me. What you showed me, coming to that house without being asked, staying without making me ask you to stay. She looked at the empty road where the motorcycles had gone. That people are better than you're afraid they are is safer than fear tells you it is. She breathed in. Standing in front of you even when they look nothing like what you expected. Even when every rule you were given says to be afraid of them might be exactly who you needed to find. Nathan held her a little tighter. Trust no one in suits, he said softly. Except love. Except love, she said. They stood together in the empty parking lot in the cold November morning, and the sound of 400 motorcycles was somewhere in the distance now, still carrying the day forward, in the way that things carry forward when the people attached to them have decided they matter. Sandra was inside, cleaning up the registration table with the kind of aggressive cheerfulness that was her natural mode. Dex was talking to Briggs near the entrance, both of them with coffee cups, both of them looking comfortable in the way of people who have been through something together and found themselves on the same side. Dolan was on her phone near the news crew, doing the careful official dance of saying something, without saying too much, but with something in her posture that was looser than usual, the particular ease of a person whose long work has finally broken into light. Cole's jacket pocket had a slight weight in it on the left side, where the chain sat against the lining. He was somewhere on the road, leading 400 riders through the valley, and he was thinking about a high school history teacher who had worn a silver chain for 37 years and had believed in showing up and telling the truth and not making people feel small. He was thinking about a parking lot in the rain and a sleeve and 3 words and 1 step forward. He was thinking about the dog named Freight and the song his mother used to hum, and the year at 19 that he never talked about, and all the long road between that year and this one. He was thinking that the road had been worth it. Not always easy. Not without cost. Not without the kind of weight that accumulates in a life lived at the edges of things, that settles in the joints and the quiet hours and the moments between one thing and the next. Worth it. The whole long, complicated, honest, imperfect worth of it. He was thinking that you never know, when you step forward, what you're stepping into. You don't know the story. You don't know the drive in the coat or the 6 days of running or the grandson in protective custody or the federal investigation that's going to take another 18 months to fully resolve. You don't know any of it. You just know that someone grabbed your sleeve and you stepped forward. And that turned out to be everything. Carter looked at the road where the motorcycles had gone, and she knew with the complete and settled certainty of a woman who had come through fire and found herself not reduced by it, but enlarged that the most important decision of her life had not been the one she made on a dark Tuesday in the parking lot of a diner in a town she'd never been to. The most important decision had been the one she made every day after, what she had learned, to carry it forward, to stand in front of anyone who came to her the way she had come to Cole, frightened, running, out of options, grabbing the nearest sleeve, and to step forward without asking why, because she knew now what it meant when someone ran to you, and she knew what it cost when you turned away. And she would never, not for the rest of her life, turn away.